וישב Ya'akov בארץ מגורי אביו בארץ כנען. Yaakov settled in the land where his father lived, in the land of Canaan. To understand this, and especially the double expression in the land where his father lived, and again in the land of Canaan, we need to look deeper. There's a pasuk that says, "I will walk before Hashem in the lands of the living." We see that it uses the phrase lands in plural. This hints that there are two levels of lands, meaning two types of vessels that hold and reveal higher divine life. Just as life is plural, chaim, so to artis is plural. This refers to multiple levels. To explain this, we need to first understand why is Eretz Yisrael constantly called in the Torah Eretz Canaan. After all, Cham is the father of Canaan. What kind of praise is that for the holiest land? And also, what does the pasuk mean? Canaan biyadei meizne mirma. Canaan, in his hands are deceitful scales. What does it mean when it says "V'lo ya'od Canaan b'beis Hashem tzavos b'yemahu"? That we no longer a Canaanite in the house of Hashem. The explanation begins with a fundamental principle. All of Torah is structured as this, corresponding to that. Just as in the realm of unholiness there is Lavan, Esav, Sarat Habachim, Sarat Mashkim, etc., so to these categories exist in holiness, in elevated form. Everything in holiness has a parallel distortion in Klippa. The three sons of Noach, Shem, Cham, and Yafas, in their source above, represent three holy colors of the rainbow. There's this white, red, and green, each corresponding to a holy spiritual quality. But through the chain of spiritual descent, the Staushlos, where light falls from level to level, Cham eventually becomes the source of coarse physicality, the father of Canaan. To understand Canaan and holiness, we need to look at the meaning of the word. Canaan means a merchant, as the pasuk. Canaan yanech b'dei aretz, and merchants were nobles of the land. We also have the pasuk Canaan b'yadei meizne mirma. Now this can be understood as a metaphor. A merchant throws out money, gold, silver, giving it away from his possession, but he does so only in order to gain more, to profit, to increase. His entire goal in spending is to bring in something far greater. So too the source of the Jewish soul. Knesset Yisrael is compared in exile to such a merchant. This is hinted in the pasuk where Yitzchak says to Esav, "Your brother came with subtlety and took your blessing." And also the pasuk Eis Asher Shalat, this is Adam Lera, a time when one man rules over another to his detriment. This means the Shekhinah enters into exile, and clothing itself in the nations and giving them life, as if giving away its gold and silver, so that through this holy sparks become refined. The Chazal say the Jews were exiled only in order to gather converts, holy sparks. The purpose of exile is to ultimately reach the time when Bila Hamavetz Lanetzach, death will be swallowed up forever. And Vesrucha Tova Av Min Haaretz, I will remove the spirit of impurity from the earth, and the revelation of Aniglik Vayda Hashem Erakal Basu Yachtav, the glory of Hashem will be revealed, and all flesh will see. What happens in the world as a whole plays out within every Jewish soul in personal avodah. Before the soul descended into this world and entered a physical body, it was utterly attached to its source in Hashem, burning with natural love and awe, like a flame rising on its own. This natural love and fear is called Kesef and Zav, silver and gold. Kesef from Nichsef Nichsaf, the longing, yearning, referring to love. Zav from Mitzpah Nyasa Zav, the north. Mitzvah Nyasa Zav, the north, the left side, referring to awe. But when the soul descends into a physical body, these natural feelings become concealed and buried. The love and awe it once felt openly becomes hidden inside the coarse physical heart. So why does the soul descend at all, if it loses so much? Because the pasuk says, the Torah of your mouth is better for me than thousands of gold and silver. Alfi also means learning, meaning the gain from Torah and Avodah in this world is infinitely greater than the natural, spiritual gold and silver the soul had before. Chazal say 1 hour of tshuva and good deeds in this world are more precious than all the spiritual pleasures of the world to come, because through tshuva ilah, higher tshuva from the depth of the heart, the soul reaches a level of cleaving to Hashem that is far beyond what it had before descending. This is the advantage of Rish Be'esh, the fiery yearning of the heart, which comes specifically from darkness, from struggle. To understand this more deeply, the pasuk says, I am first, I am last, and besides me there is no God. This means, Ani Hashem lo shnisi. Hashem says, Hashem have not changed. Before the worlds were created, and after the worlds were created, there was no change. All the worlds, higher and lower, don't take up space at all relative to him. Before him, everything is literally nothing. So what does mibalad mean? It means everything that appears to be outside this pure essence, anything that lives within time and space, the sense of being an independent existence, all of that is not truly elikim, not truly divine, except to the extent that it receives life from his malchus. As it says, malchuscha malchus kol olam, your kingship is the kingship of all worlds. All the worlds grasp only Hashem's attribute of malchus, not Hashem himself. Hashem's essence, atmos, is beyond being grasped at all, not by the highest angels, not by chachmei law. So when a Jew contemplates this, that no thought can grasp, not even the holiest thought, the soul begins to yearn, to melt, to long, to break out of the confines of the body and reconnect to its true source. This is the fiery yearning. This is the fiery yearning of Rish. This fiery yearning is Rish Be'esh, the deepest level of the heart. Before the soul came down, its love and awe were based on understanding. But now, through struggle, concealment, and darkness, it reaches something far higher, the essence of the heart, the point of the soul. When the Beis Hamikdash stood, the level of Rusad Liba, this level of Rusad Liba, the deep well of the heart, would be drawn openly for the revelation of Ein Sof in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. As the Tanya says, a person's will would naturally be bottled to his will. And this is the meaning of the verse, Ki tiu li eretz chayvetz. But in the time it goes, it says, and from there you will seek Hashem, your God, and you will find Misham, from there specifically, meaning when a person contemplates the exact opposite in the ways of Hashem, how far he has become to the very end of distance, acting against his will, and yet asks, from where do such people even receive life and vitality? From his will is what gives existence to all beings. It says, Ve'ata machayas kulam. So how do even those who go against his will live? Chazal say, Kama archen Arkich Apin Kameh. How great is his long suffering. From Archampin, the level of a long face, infinite patience, the life force travels downward, descending through countless levels to a fall to give life even to those who violate his will. And therefore, if such vitality descends even to those against him, then to those who do his will, all the more so will flow a level of Ratzon Elyon, the supernal will beyond worlds entirely, not through any chain of intellect or emotion, but from the inner point of the heart, the level of tshuva ilah which precedes the world. And this is the meaning of kisid deshana b'chol avalcha b'chol nafscha, to seek it with your whole heart and soul, meaning a complete inner transformation from one extreme to the other, transforming darkness to light by awakening this deep roots of the liba. Through this, one becomes disgusted with the physical indulgences of this world and pulls his heart and soul to cling only to him. This is like the parable of the Seichel, the merchant. A merchant puts out gold and silver from his own pocket. He invests, he expends in order to gain far more in return. So too, the neshama invests her gold and silver, the revealed Av and Yira, by allowing them to descend into the body, the animal soul and the animal soul, where they become concealed. But specific to this descent, she gains a far greater fire, the Liba that bursts forth like fiery sparks from the opposite, from the struggle itself. This is the meaning of V'cham hu avi K'naan, read with a zak of gadol. The heat and fiery passion that arises upward from the opposite, from the hepech, is what turns K'naan into business, into gain. It is, as it says, she tastes that her merchandise is good, but first one must precede this with Yirat Hata, drawn from the level of his kingship Malchus, which is called upper K'naan of holiness. From this, one proceeds upward to the level where K'naan holds false weights, meaning the struggle with the lower drives. From this wrestling, one arrives at the inner Liba, the deep point of the heart, and this is the meaning of Karav Hashem b'chol kedeh b'chol sheikru uvem, as Hashem is close to all who call to him, but only to those who call to him in truth, meaning from the inner point of the heart. After all, we see that even a thief, while tunneling into a house, calls out to Hashem, yet he continues in his wickedness. We also see people who can awaken Ava and Yira during davening, yet the feeling fades afterwards. Why? Because these feelings were only grasped in the intellect, the makif, but they were never actually penetrated, the inner chamber of the heart. When one calls out in truth, from the depths of the heart, then the lip of truth stands forever, unshakable. Now the pasuk says, the first koil is written Chaser without a vav, and this is the level of kala the lo yishtama, the inaudible voice. But the second koil is mali with a vav, the level of kala the ishtama, the audible voice, as explained in the Zohar. What does this mean? Yaakov is yud Ekev, the yud, the inception of thought. For with a yud, the world has come into creation. The world to come was created, extending all the way down to the heel, to the level of speech. Yaakov spans from one end to the other. Mereish kol dargan across all worlds, and within every world there was the head and a foot. As it says, v'amdu raglav. And thus the audible voice, called the Ishtama, refers to Torah, the drawing down like a voice that takes the inner intent of the heart and reveals it in speech. Torah is chachmei, divine wisdom, wisdom not of human type. The reasons of all the mitzvahs were not fully revealed to grasp all the depths and particulars. Instead, Torah descended into revelation by clothing itself in physical matters, and so on. And this, called the Ishtama, is the level of voice and drawing down of Yaakov, Yud Ekev. The Yud, which is the Chachmei Law, extends downward all the way to Ekev, the heel, the level of Asiyah. But in order for a person to become a vessel prepared for Chachmei Law to dwell within him and be revealed in his Torah learning, he must first enter into a state of bittul through the inner Ru'us Liba, and this is the level of Kala de Lo Ishtama, the inaudible voice for Ruach Amshech Ruach. A spirit draws down a spirit, meaning this inner Ruach draws down the light of Hashem to dwell within him. so that Hashem's wisdom becomes revealed inside him, and his own Chabad, Chachma bin Adas, become nullified and secondary to the divine wisdom. And this is the true union of his spirit with the divine spirit, is Dabkesrucha Berucha. And within this it is written, Elekar Bekirbi, God is within me. And also, V'yasn Davare Beficha, I will place my words in your mouth, meaning literally my words, for the word of Hashem is the halacha. And this is what what becomes revealed in the person, that is Hashem's own speech emerging from his throat. Therefore, it says about Torah, Bimalachim Bidleichu. Chazal say, Man Malkei Rabbanan. Who are these kings? The sages. And Mitnisa Malkasa, the Mishnah, is the queen. Mishnasa Malkasa. From when one is utterly bottled to the word of Hashem, to his will and his wisdom, and he takes up no space of ego at all, then the word of the king is what rules. This is the level of king issuing decrees. If Reuven argues this way, the ruling is so. Do this and do not do that. Whereas the level of servant, Eved, applies to the fulfillment of mitzvahs, where one carries out the will of the king as the servant performs the king's instructions. Now we can understand the pasuk Vayeshev Ya'akov Be'eretz Miguri Aviv. Vayeshev means lowering, descending from one standing, meaning the level of Yaakov Yud Ekev descends downward to be in the land of the settlements of his father. And the word Miguri has two meanings: one, fear, Yira; two, storehouse, as in a barn filled with produce, a vessel that stores within it. And these two meanings are one. For Yiras Hashem here, the fear of Hashem is his storehouse. As Chazal say, the storehouse of Yiras Shemayim is the keli, the vessel that can hold Chachmei Law. This is why it is called Miguri, of the storehouse, or the fear of his father, because Yaakov is Yodekev, drawing down from Chachmei Law all the way to the lowest level. So Chachmei Law is called his father. This describes Yechidei Law, the upper union, and as Dabkesrucha Berucha in Torah study, becoming bottled to him at the level of Chachmei Law. But now we must explain the lower union, meaning the person becoming a vessel for his dwelling in the world, in the level of his kingship, Malchus, so that even in worldly existence, the unity of Hashem Echad should dwell and be revealed. This lower union requires another sitting, another descent, another hashpala from the level of Yaakov to draw down the attribute of Chesed from the highest levels all the way to the lowest, into the physical earth below, which is Kena'an, the level of his kingship, Malchus. For a Melech b'mishpat Yamid Aretz, the king establishes the world through justice. And v'huchem b'chesed kisei, the throne is prepared with kindness, for the existence of the world is through Chesed, as it says, Olam Chesed Yibana. This is accomplished through the observance of mitzvahs, whose root is Chesed, and in particular through the mitzvah of tzedakah, which is why it is called mitzvah without any other description, because it is weightier than all other mitzvahs, as the Tanya explains. Ve'hine, אנחנו, מאלמים, behold, we were binding sheaves. The Torah says, Eila hamalachim asher melchu, these are the kings who reigned, referring to the 7 primordial kings of Tayu, who died, meaning their kelim shattered and fell down at the shviras kelim. They fell into the level of Shemban of Atzilus, which is the source of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, and from there descended into the worlds of Bia. This is the meaning of the deaths of the king as it is known. In Shviras HaKelim, many levels fell, souls, angels, even Elikos itself, divine powers, all were shattered and fell into Bia. The fall of these divine powers means they descended to give life to the worlds of Bia. To understand the Shvir, the breaking of the Kelim and the Netzotis, we can compare it to a simple example. Take the word Baruch. When the 4 letters are joined to one word, the concept of blessing is enclosed within them. But if the letters separate, the base stands alone, the resh stands alone, the meaning completely disappears. There is no longer any vessel for the concept that had been enclosed in the word. Exactly so with Shviras HaKelim. The vessels of Torah were separated into many, many pieces, disconnected from one another, until the divine light that had rested inside them could no longer be contained. Because of this separation, they fell into a lower state, the condition of Bia, and from this came the worlds of separation, filled with endless categories and species of creation. As it says, Hayesh Mispar, is there a number to his troops. The essence of the emanator, the Atmas HaMatzil, is Yochad HaMyuchad, absolutely one, totally indivisible. Therefore, for there to be creations which are defined by their plurality, their separation, and their sense of independent existence, the very opposite of his absolute unity, Enem Avadei, there had to be a Shviras HaKelim. Because through the breaking into countless fragments, the possibility of multiplicity emerges. And through this fragmentation, every created being becomes a distinct entity unto itself, each angel separate from its fellow. The deeper the descent of the Kelim and its suttas, the greater the separation and multiplicity that results. The closer a thing is to him, the greater its bittul and unity. The further it descends, the more division and separation will appear. Thus, when the fallen sparks reach Asiya, the lowest world, the multiplicity is the greatest of all. This explains the pasuk, the river that flows from Eden, that is Chachma, the Atzilus, travels through all of Atzilus until it reaches the Gan, which is Malchus the Atzilus. As long as it remains in Atzilus, it's still one river, completely beyond division. For Atzilus, he and his attributes are one, absolute unity, the opposite of separation. But when the river reaches the head of Bria, then it says, Misham Yipad, from there it divides into 4 heads. And even though no new water is added, nonetheless, it becomes divided. These 4 heads correspond to the 4 camps of the Shekhinah, Pnei Aryeh on the right, Pnishar, and so on. Yet even these are still general categories, for each one contains many particulars within it. When the descent continues further from the level of Michal, which correspond to Pnei Arya, there emerge 216,000 individual levels, the entire camp of Michal. And from Gavriel, the level of Pnei Shar, come many individual angels, the full details of the camp of Gavriel. All this is still within the world of Bria. In Yetzirah, the division increases further into countless spirits, Ruch Datzira, and in Asiyah, the fragmentation becomes exponentially greater into the innumerable nefashos of Asiyah. All this stems from Shviras HaKelim, where the vessels fragment piece after piece, multiplicity upon multiplicity. However, angels are already considered rectified, part of Olam HaTikun, which is why they are described as V'Hashem Misharzav Kulam Oimdim. The level of Yotzei Misharzav refers to those being refined constantly. Just as this fragmentation exists among angels, it exists identically among souls. Through the many descents of Ashtarsla, souls are divided into teeny pieces, layer after layer of the subdivision. The 4 camps of the Midbar, the Arba the Galan, correspond to the root levels of the souls of Bria. The soul of Yehuda includes all souls of the camp of Yehuda, and then divides into countless individual souls within the same camp. The same applies to all the tribes and camps. From this came the 600,000 root souls, Shishim Ribe in Bria, for Torah speaks in the language of Bria. But in Yetzirah, the division multiply even more into the level of Ruach, the Yetzirah, and in Asiyah, the number of the nefashos is immensely greater than them all. Yet, the 600,000 souls are the ones that have already been rectified and elevated out of Shviras HaKelim, becoming included within Olam HaTikun. Exactly as we see Shvira creating multiplicity in the souls and angels, the same happens in the divine powers themselves. They too are shattered and scattered into Biyah, and the further they descend, the more they subdivide, each nitzot splitting into many smaller nitzotos, just like the angels and souls. As is known from the verse, Chazal say this refers to the 288 fallen sparks that fell from the world of Tayu together with the broken vessels. This number, Reish Beches, is the initial level of fragmentation as it existed in Atzilus, the very first stage of their descent. At that point, the sparks were divided exactly into 288 pieces, hence Rapach Meis. The Reish Beches, 288 sparks, died. But after they fell from Atzilus and Bria, each one of these 288 sparks broke down into many more pieces, and when these descended from Bria to Yetzirah, they fragmented even further, and from Yetzirah to Asiyah, they split into thousands and tens of thousands of tiny sparks. And with this, we can understand why Galus has lasted so much longer than 1,700 years. It is known that the whole purpose is to mevar the Reish Peches Netzutzim, the 288 sparks, and when the Birudim are completed, Mashiach comes immediately. Incidentally, this doesn't say the Maimer, but the Rebbe said that we have already completed and elevated all these sparks, and indeed, therefore, Mashiach is already revealed, and now our only job left is to greet him. Okay, back to the Maimer. So the question is obvious: how is it possible that the Reish Peches and Tzutzim have still not been fully elevated after so long? Generation after generation, every Yid refines his portion, and the number of Yidden working on these Birudim is far greater than the number of souls that came out of Mitzrayim. Shishim Ribe. Today, Baruch Hashem, the Jewish people are far more numerous, and even in earlier times, there were villages with populations larger than Shishim Ribe, like the Gemara says about Kfar Shachalayim. The explanation is that down here in Asiyah, the Nitzitzim become split into thousands and tens of thousands without number. The number 288 applies only in Atzilus. There too, the number of general root souls is Shishim Ribe, and they must refine the 288 great sparks, the Nitzitzim of Atzilus. And just as down here the number of souls increased, the number of Nitzitzim also increased massively, becoming countless small fragments. Therefore, Galus continues until every last Bidur is completed, and when the Bidur is done, Yavi HaGoyel b'mhedav minami, the Redeemer comes b'mhedav Yomeinu. The pasuk says, "Marabu masacha Hashem kulam chachma asisa." The multiplicity comes from the Shviras HaKelim, where the creations of Bria, Tzira, and especially Asiyah become many and separate, each thing standing apart from the next. That is the Marabu masacha Hashem. But kulam chachma asisa. Asisa means tikkun. Through chachma, everything becomes rectified. Chachma brings bittul, allowing creations to become nullified and absorbed into Him, and to become unified rather than separated. This is the work of the Jewish people, and this is the Torah of man, to refine the Bidurim and lift them from separation into the oneness of Hashem. This is the meaning of the phrase, Ata echad v'shimcha echad mikamcha ki Yisrael gayach ba'aretz. Ata refers to his very essence, totally one. Shimcha, the radiance, the light that extends from him, is also absolutely one. And gayach ba'aretz means that the Yidden make echad even down in the world where the greatest separation exists. Even though Asiyah is the place of fragmentation, through Torah and Avodah, the Yidden create oneness there too, elevating the fallen sparks into the unity of Hashem. This is the meaning of Yeshev's dream. Vienna אנחנו מעלמים besech asada. The Shvatim, Reuven, Shimon, and the others were involved in elevating the Nitzaitim that had fallen to the state of separation caused by the Shvira. Their avodah was to raise these sparks upward as mine nukvin to become absorbed in Malchus Datzilos. Through this, they became connected and unified, for they were now included in the oneness of Hashem. Ma'alum is like tying sheaves in a field. Many stalks are gathered, bound together, and formed into a single bundle. At first, the stalks are scattered, but the binding brings them into unity. This is exactly what happens when Nitzaitim are elevated from the place of separation into unity. They become literally one, where before they were fragmented. Besech Asad refers to Chakal Tapuchin Kadishin, which is Malchus Abatzilos, where the Mayin Nukvin become included. There is another meaning. The word Alumim comes from Ilim, silent. Elevating Mayin Nukvin is an act of Bittul Hayesh, becoming totally nullified in Hashem. In the state one cannot speak, meaning cannot influence outwardly. Speech represents outward expression and revelation, but the essential nature of Mayin Nukvin is inward Bittul, the opposite of outward influence, and therefore it is called Alumim, silent. This is like the principle of Aidi Ditad Lemivla, when something is preoccupied absorbing it cannot give, like water freezing, or the difference between the 49 days of Sphira, which are Shpa, revelation, and the 42 journeys, which are Halas, inner ascent, the opposite of revelation. When a person speaks, it is only to communicate outwardly, but when he is entirely focused inward, he does not need speech. In spiritual beings, speech means influence from cause to effect. When the cause stands as an entity, it can influence the effect. But when the cause is totally absorbed in its own source, it cannot influence another because of its deep bittul. This bittul is like a fetus in the womb. It has no independent existence. It receives everything from the mother. Only after birth does it become a being able to speak and influence others. So too with Nitzaitim that rise as Mayin Nukvin. At first, there were independent entities capable of influencing outwardly. But when they rise into bittul to the Ein Sof, they become like a fetus, completely dependent and unable to speak. This is Alumim. There is also a second pregnancy after birth, as explained in Eitz Chaim. To receive Meichem, the godless one must again enter a state of total bittul. This is the second pregnancy after already having Meichem, and the ability to influence one enters bittul again, so that greater Meichem can come later. All of this was the avodah of the Shvatim, who belonged to the world of Bria, except Yosef, who was rooted in Atzilus. They are the Merkava Malchus of Atzilus, like the 12 oxen supporting Shleim's mikveh, representing the 12 levels at the head of Bria, and the sea, Malchus of Atzilus, resting upon them. Their avodah and elevation of Mayin Nukvin from the Birurim in Bia rose upward only until Malchus of Atzilus, where they became included. This whole idea is explained earlier, but there is another point. Even after the man has already become elevated and included within Malchus, it still needs a second stage of refinement, and that happens through the mad. This means that the mad of the Mayin Churin of Zah must come down to refine the man, the Mayin Nukvin of Nukva. This is the Yichud of Zah and Nukva. Here's the idea. Even though the sparks have already been elevated and included in the state of man, meaning they've reached the level of Bittul Hayesh, they still cannot fully unify with Elikos, not in the way they existed before the Shvir Sakelim, when they were literally Elikos, actual divine emanations of the Asara spheres Detayu. To reach that full unity, they must receive a radiance from Shem Ma Datzilos. Only then do they reach true Bittul, the real Achtos with Elikos. In analogy, when a person refines sparks by eating and drinking, and then later davens with Ava Yivira, his energy from the food becomes included in his davening. But even then, his davening is still far from the true Achtos of Elikos. Only when through that man Hashem shines back at him from above, when a real awe or love suddenly descends upon him, only then do these sparks truly unite with actual Elikos. That descending radiance is the Mad. Even Rabbi Akiva, whose soul left him at Achad, even that mysterious nefesh is still the surrender of a created being, incomparable to actual Elikos. Only when a ray of the true Echad shone upon him did his mysterious nefesh become absorbed in true Achdus. This is the transition from Yichud Hatah, Bittul Hayesh, to Yichud Ilah, the true essential Bittul. And this Mad, the radiance that comes down to refine the man, the man, this is the level of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef is described as V'nar Yetze Me'edin Lahashkas Asagan. The river is the flow from Ein Sof, and the garden is Malchus. That flow reaches only until Malchus, and does not descend into Bria Yitzir or Asiyah. That's why these lower worlds are called worlds of separation. But Yosef, he is the Yesod that connects and continues the radiance of Ein Sof downward, even into the lower worlds. When the sparks are elevated to Malchus as man, Yosef brings down the Mad, the Ein Sof as revealed through Chachma. That's the river nourishing the garden. So Yosef's level of refinement is far above that of the other Shvatim. The Shvatim elevate the sparks up to Malchus, that's man, but those sparks still haven't become Elikos itself. Yosef brings the man that completes the job, turning the man into true divine unity. This explains the dream. Vienna אנחנו Malum. All the Shvatim, including Yosef, participated equally in the first refinement, elevating man to Malchus. But then, Yosef's bundle rises, meaning his level is higher because he draws down the mad that completes the entire process. The Shvatim cannot do this second refinement on their own because their root is in Bria, whereas Yosef is rooted in Atzilus, specifically in Yisai. Therefore, doesn't mean bowing in worship. It means their sparks can only become truly divine once they receive Yosef's mad. Without Yosef, their man would remain at the level of Bitl Hayesh, never reaching true Elikos. Now, we have to understand what this bowing means, and this will also help within the second dream. The sun, moon, and stars bowing to Yosef. Yaakov himself seems to bow, but Yaakov is higher than Yosef. Yosef is Guf, Yaakov is Guf, Yosef is Brisai, son, father and son. How does that make sense? The explanation is that Shtachava contains two elements. One, Bitl. The one who bows nullifies himself. Two, Hamshacha, lowering the head signifies drawing something down from above. And truthfully, the two depend on each other. Real bittul causes a real Hamshacha. We see this in davening. When one bows at Baruch Ata, the bow expresses bittul, and the lowering of the head draws down the radiance from Baruch into Ata. So too here. Tishtachaven lalomasi means the Shvatim, by elevating their man into a state of bittul, awaken and draw down the mad through Yosef. The man creates a vessel because blessing does not rest in an empty space. When the feminine prepares itself, the masculine desire awakens, like in the physical analogy. Thus, they circle, they prepare, they form the vessel of man. Through their bittul, they draw down the mad into Yosef, specifically into his Pnimi. But Yaakov's bowing is different. Yaakov doesn't bow for bittul. He bows only to draw down a higher makif into Yosef, not in Pnimi. Finally, why did the Shvatim hate Yosef for these dreams? They made a fundamental mistake. They believe that since Sham Alu Shvatim Shiftei Kar, the 12 directions of Zah, the Shvatim's spiritual root is in Atzilus, just like Yosef. If so, they thought they didn't need him. They can get mad directly from their own source. But they were wrong. Their root is indeed in Zah, but their actual level, as they are here below, is in Bria, like the 12 oxen supporting the sea in the Beis HaMikdash. Their job is only the elevation of man. Yosef, however, even if as he descends below, remains rooted in Yesod Atzilus, the only one who can draw down mad. Therefore, they depend on him. Without Yosef, there is no second refinement, no achtos amitis. So it starts off, Shira Malas B'Shuv Hashem. That's the pasuk. When Hashem will return the exiles, we will be like dreamers. A dream is the power to combine two opposites into one scenario, as if they belong together. You can dream of a ship flying through the air. Two things that cannot happen together in reality. Why? Because in sleep, the mayach haseichel, the mind that distinguishes truth from imagination, withdraws. What remains active is the kayach ha-medame, the imaginative faculty, which can mix and fuse contradictions freely. But when you're awake, the seichel reasserts itself and does not allow contradictions to mingle. So too in Galus, the spark of Elikos inside the nefesh is in a state of shena, spiritual sleep. The meichin of the neshama are concealed. This allows a person to combine two opposites in one heart. A yid can stand and daven and contemplate yichudei Elah and yichudei Tata, awaken a fiery ava rabba to the point that he wants nothing but Hashem, so that his soul wants to strip away its garments and cleave to him. Yet the moment davening ends, the love fades, and he becomes totally absorbed in business, running after profit. Each person chasing his own gain. His mind assembles two completely opposite modes as if they belong together, but in truth, they are worlds apart. Because even though the Torah tells us Sheish Shan Tizda Sadacha, and Shema it says Vasafta de Ganecha, meaning even physical work contains Avodas Hashem, Birudim during the 6 years and elevation in the 7th. Still, that's not how most people relate to it. People driven by bodily desire don't see the spiritual content at all. Their whole will and pleasure is directed to filling the needs of the body. This is the exact opposite of the purity and oneness they felt during davening. But even after recognizing this contradiction, a person must not think that the inspiration he felt during davening was a fantasy, a delusion of the imagination, like a dream. He might argue, if after davening I turn right back to loving myself, then maybe the ava in davening wasn't real at all. Maybe it was a false blending of opposites, like a dream. The Maimer says no. This dream-like quality actually comes from a very lofty source. To understand this, the Maimer brings the pasuk, the Gemara asks, isn't his name one already? The answer is now his name is not pronounced the way it is written, meaning his shame, the way the divine energy is revealed in the world, is in Galus. In Galus, Hashem's name is in a state of sleep. with the three Malachim concealed. Then the neshama receives its life to a very high level from Olam ha-igulim, where there is no up or down, no distinction or separation. Everything is equal and unified. Like Chazal say, Elu ve'elu divri alekim chayim. But when the light descends through Olam ha-kavim, igulim means around the circle. Kav is straight, a line. Distinctions appear. Chesed, gvura, right, left, separation and definition. In igulim, everything is united. In kav, everything is divided. Because in its root, in igulim, opposing qualities are unified. But once it comes into the system of kav, through chachma and das, separation becomes visible. This lofty unity cannot be revealed openly in this world of structured distinctions. It can only shine through a state of concealment, like sleep. Albish Shemayim Kav, darkness covering the heavens. That concealment allows a faint glimmer of the superior light to pass through, not as chachma, but as a dream, where opposites can exist together because in their source they truly are one. In the future, however, the concealment will fall away. He will no longer be hidden behind garments. Then Shemai Yeh Echad, his name will be revealed exactly as is written. We will see ayin ba'ayin. Then we will say, hayinu kexulmim, we will recognize that the spiritual life force that sustains us during Galus came from the lofty realm that is access to the metaphor of a dream. The dream was not fake. It was higher than wakefulness. And with this, we understand the greatness of Yaakov and Yosef and why their avodah came through dreams. There is even a certain element where Yosef surpasses Moshe Rabbeinu. Nadav and Avihu were sparks from Yosef.נחנו tmim l'nefesh adam refers to Avihu. Nadav though was from Ruach, requiring no sprinkling. V'ruach nediva tizmecheni. And this is the meaning of Noiheg Katzain Yosef. During Galus, the Anhaga of Yidden reflects Yosef's quality, rooted in the dimension of dream, meaning the light from Igulim, a transcendent unity that can combine opposites. Therefore, Yosef is called Ben Peiris, relating to the words Paiter and Teifer. He can untie and stitch together. Thus, he becomes the expert in interpreting dreams because his sherish is in the level of his sherish is in the level from which dreams draw their power.
Bekesliv, Yomim, Dachnoכה, on the 25th of Kislev, the days of Dachnoכה, when the Yonim entered the heichal, when the kingdom of Kexulnim grew strong and defeated them, they found only one flask of oil. In the following year, they established 8 days as Halal and Hodah. We need to understand the idea of Halal and Hodah. We also need to understand why, by this miracle, the sages established the lighting of candles as a remembrance of the Beis HaMikdash, because they found one flask of oil. Yet, by other miracles, they did not institute such a practice. And also, what is the connection between candles and Halal and Hodah? Matter is explained through the verse Ner Mitzvah Torah Ohr. To understand this, we first look at the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, about which the sages said, does he need its light? It says, meaning at night Aaron would light all 7 lamps. In the morning he would clean them, prepare them, and light only the Ner Hamaravi, the 6th lamp, which was used to begin and to end. The idea is that lamps represent the midas. The 7 emotional attributes, and for every holy midah, the opposite exists in the klippa. From the holy attribute of love, for example, comes through the chain of descent, physical lust. From holy awe comes negative fear, anger, and so on. These fallen emotions must be elevated and returned to holiness, so all 7 midas become l'cha Hashem hagdula through bittul, and the refinement happens through chachma. For b'chachma is beridu, chachma is the light that illuminates the midas and purifies them. Therefore, at night, when darkness dominates, there must be light drawn into each of the 7 midas individually. In the daytime, it is enough to light the 6th lamp, which is the essential channel, and from it, light flows into all the midas. Just as Aaron drew Chachma into the world, meaning into the 7 supernal midas that rule creation, so too he drew Chachma into the souls of Israel, who are 70 souls, who came from the loins of Yaakov, corresponding to the 7 lamps. They are the offspring of Yaakov, Yod Eikav, meaning the Yod Chachma extends downward all the way to the Eikav, the lowest levels. This is the meaning of Yod Yechezes Ba'akev Esav, his hand, meaning Yod grasps the heel of Esav, preventing Esav's power from spreading and dominating, instead forcing it to submit to holiness. This was the function of Aaron's lighting, to draw the Yod of Chachma, the Yod of Yaakov Chachma down into the Eikav, so that even the natural emotions of the animal soul rise and become included in holiness. It says, first Bahal is lifting up the lamps, and afterwards Yaktidena offering incense. Likewise, in the morning, as explained in the laws of the daily service, the preparation of the 2 lamps comes before the incense. To understand why the incense followed the lighting and preparing of the lamps, we must know this. The lamps represent the elevation of the midas, which have descended into the physicality of the animal soul, must be elevated back to holiness. But the incense represents the elevation of the letters, which are the garments of the midas and correspond to the level of inanimate. Letters of holiness are called Chochmas Bas Tzion, the wall of daughter Zion, just as two stones create two houses, and so on. The letters of the Meichen, Midas Dibur Maisa, that fall into coarse physicality under the domination of the Klippas cannot be elevated through Chochma. Chochma shines only in the emotions themselves, love, awe, and so on, which are spiritual, as explained elsewhere on the verse Vayitzer. But the coarse physical letters can only be elevated through Ketaitis, whose ingredients come from the substances with no taste and not food at all. They were entirely in the category of daimim, and through burning them, they produced a fragrance that ascended upward. Through the fragrance, there is nichayach, meaning a drawing down of the divine name Havaya, Yud symbolizing Chachma. All this took place in the Beis HaMikdash with actual kabbanis. Today, tefillah takes the place of offerings. To understand its structure, in the order of the daily service, the blood of the Talmud came before the preparation of the two lamps. The lamps before the Ketairis, and the Ketairis before placing the limbs on the fire. Therefore, blood first, lamps next, Ketairis next, limbs last. This order exists in Avodah during Tefillah. The essential Avodah of Shema and Tefillah is the Mesiras Nefesh of Shema. There are two forms of Mesiras Nefesh. One, Limser Nafshe Be'echad, to surrender the soul in the word Echad, representing the divine oneness. Two, Uvechol Nafshecha, even if he takes your life. To understand these two, Mesiras Nefesh and Echad relates to the godly soul, which stands in the state of total bittul, as it says, Chai Hashem Shadamad Lefanav. Standing Amida means utter surrender before the Ein Sof. There are two kinds of Mesiras Nefesh in Kriya Shema. One is when a person gives himself over completely in the word Echad. The other is the V'chol Nafshecha, even if they take your life. To understand the difference, Mesiras Nefesh in Echad refers to the Nefesh Alekis, which is naturally in a state of absolute bittul, as the pasuk says, Chai Hashem asher amadati lefanav, I have stood before Hashem. Standing means total nullification before the infinite light of Hashem. But V'chol Nafshecha refers to the Nefesh Bahamas, that even the animal soul is forced into a skafia, and even ishapcha. This Mesiras Nefesh is not in Echad, but in Baruch Shem Kved Mechus Le'el Bad. The idea is this: all levels, Malakalam and Sevikalam, are called only His name, as we say, Melech Meshubach Mafer Adiyad Shmei Hagadol. Adiyad refers to all the elevations from world to world, Elam Haba, the higher Gan Eden, the days of Mashiach, Tchias Amesim, and the countless levels described in the Zohar. And really, there are infinitely more. As it says, Dudav Ein Mispar, his legions have no number. These legions are angels, the external energies of the world. How much more so the neshamas, the inner essence of the worlds. All of this is only within his name, Shem Kaveh Malchusay. It's like a king. His presence fills only the palace, but throughout the country, people experience only his name, not his actual essence. So too, the divine energy that gives life to all beings is only a radiance, a ziv, an extension called Ein Sof, but the atmas of Ein Sof is infinitely beyond, unchanged, Ani Hashem Lo Shnisi. Now, the Nefesh Alekis, being the inner dimension of the worlds, becomes nullified and unified with the true infinite essence. It feels how Hashem is utterly beyond all comparison, but by the time the life force descends all the way down to the lowest levels, the Nebesh Bahamas in a physical body, the physicality blocks and conceals that higher unity. It appears to the physical eyes as something separate and independent. Still, the neshama descends not for itself, because even before coming down, it already experienced Asher Amadati Lefanav, descends for the sake of the animal soul, to shine into it a glimmer of the higher unity, so that it too can be elevated, included in Hashem's infinite light. This influence comes from Baruch Shem Kaved Mechus Le'el Bad, through meditating that all existence that seems separate is really only a ziv, an external radiance of Hashem's kingship, and therefore that somethingness becomes nullified like the ray of sunlight within the sun. When the animal soul rises and becomes included in Hashem's infinite light, its power is enormous. The power of a Baal Tshuva who pulls with greater strength, because the Nefesh Bahamas originates in the Chayes Kodesh of the Merkava. These Chayes carry the throne upon which stands the figure of a man, and they rise upward with a great roaring energy. This is the meaning of the Dam HaTamid, the blood of the carbon Tamid which was sprinkled. Tzafayim Lifnei Hashem on the northern side, representing Gevurah, the side of the great roaring ascent. It is also connected with Tzafayim, the hiddenness of the last Hey of the name of Havaya, the concealment and symptom that causes that roaring. Tzafayim Lifnei Hashem means that from that very hidden source comes the fiery surge of elevation that lifts the throne and the image of man higher even than the level of Adam, which corresponds to Havaya, Yud equals Chachma, etc. The roaring ascent reaches beyond the level of Adam itself, Lifnei Havaya, the source from which the name Havaya originates. Just as the carbon Talmud offered the literal animal soul of the actual animal soul too, today, tefillah, which replaces the karbanis, is the elevation of the animal soul within a person. And this is also a fiery ascent, yearning, thirst. This is what it means. Adam, Hashem, the behemoth within a person is uplifted through the revelation of Havaya. This fiery longing is b'chol levavcha. The heart has two chambers, the right filled with air and breath, the left filled with blood. And Hadam, who nefesh, the blood, is the animal soul, whose dwelling is in the left chamber, where the natural heat and passion reside. The lungs blow cool air on the heart to temper it, and this very place becomes the seat of the divine thirst and yearning to be elevated into the infinite. And after this fiery ascent to ruach, a spirit awakens spirit and draws down a spirit, meaning after the person nullifies himself from yesh to ayin, there is drawn from above the flow from ayin to yesh, the infinite light of Hashem rests below, just as above. With all your soul means with all the kaikas of your nefesh, machshava, dibur, and maisa. And also, kol nefesh is composed of the three levels, nefesh, ruach, neshama. The main part of the person is the nefesh hamaskelis, the faculty of understanding. Each person according to his measure. Yesh ma'ale mikra, yesh ma'ale mishnah talmud. This is like the idea of hadlakas hanedis, the lighting of the menorah. In the base of mikdash during the bein harabayim, all 7 lamps were lit. But in the morning, when the kohen would clean and prepare the 2 lamps, he would light the 6th lamp right afterwards cleaning, and then afterwards light the 7th. This is the concept of the Torah, that the light of Torah shines within every part of your nefesh, the nefesh hasichlis. And from this one comes to uvechol ma'adecha, with all your might, which the sages explain as with all your money. This corresponds to tzedakah, which is the essential mitzvah. Because mitzvahs that are done through physical actions are like keteris made from spices that have no taste or are not food, yet from them is produced a reach, a fragrance that rises upward and strengthens the brain, restoring the nefesh. For the first revelation of the nefesh is specifically in the mechin of the head. And what does fragrance do? It prevents the nefesh from drawing from the mind, instead drawing it back from concealment to revelation. So too with mitzvahs, and the root of all mitzvahs is tzedakah. About tzedakah it says, "Utzedakah terem goyed," lift the person higher and higher, and it says, "Vayilbish tzedakah ka Syrian v'keva Yeshua bereishay." He wore tzedakah like a coat of mail and a helmet of salvation upon his head. A Syrian, a coat of mail is made of many small scales. Likewise, every prut of tzedakah adds up into a great shield, and the shield becomes a protection so that the sitter achra cannot draw nurture. It becomes a helmet of salvation. Now, to explain this more, it says, "Ateres teferes seva baderach tzedakah timtze," a crown of beauty of old age is found through tzedakah. Meaning, through tzedakah is formed a crown of teferes seva, the beauty of shining countenance, the illumination of yar, Hashem panav elecha, the revelation of pnimius, the depths of the heart, talumas leif. This is the deepest part of the heart that unites with the mind, as tein rein delayim ispartion, 2 friends that don't separate. Because the chutzonius lev, the external heart, does not fully unify with the mind, since the mind is independent and can contemplate alikus freely, but the pnimius lev truly unites with the mind, and through tzedakah there is a fragrance, a spiritual reach that returns the nefesh and brings illumination from the mind into the pnimius lev. This is Shemen Ekteris Yesamach Lev, oil and incense gladden the heart. This refers to Hashem, as it says, Tzor Levavi, just as the heart gives life to all the limbs, so to Hashem is Ata Mechaya Es Kulam. And the joy of the heart is the revelation of the deepest inwardness, the Pnimius of our safe, beyond all measure or comparison. And since tzedakah is the ultimate bittul hayesh, giving away the life force one earned through his toil, therefore it draws from above the flow of yesh mi'ayin, the revelation of the Pnimius of our safe itself. This is the meaning of Oisim Ritzoni Shomakim. They do the will of the omnipresent. Because Ratzon implies change, yet the verse says, Ani Hashem loishnis, Hashem have not changed. Rather, Yisrael do his will. Meaning they draw the expansion of Hashem's will into Makim, into actual space and time through the mitzvahs which are his will clothed in physical action. The 630 mitzvahs of the Torah plus the 7 mitzvahs that Rabbanan make 620 tarach, which are like the 620 pillars of light, like a pillar that connects the highest heights to the lowest places. These mitzvahs draw our safe, which is beyond all worlds, into Ratzon that becomes embodied in physical mitzvahs. Therefore, Ma'aseh Tzedakah is called a keva Yeshua, a helmet of salvation, because Yeshua is from Vayisha Hashem el Hevel. Hashem turned toward Hevel's offering, meaning it causes Hashem himself to turn and reveal his very essence. This revelation divides into the Shin Ayin Nahirin, the 370 lights, which are the root of Teferes Seva, the shining countenance. As it says regarding Kainim, Umagbas Tasalahem, the covered Lucifaris, the turbans, the Magbas correspond to this helmet of salvation, which brings about Teferes and splendor. This is Ateres to Teferes Seva, and all of this is found B'derech Tzedakah, because through Tzedakah comes the Kev Yeshua that draws down the shining inner face of Hashem, Yar Hashem Panav Elecha, the revelation of inward Elikos. After this comes the level of Evarim. In the Karbanis, there were 2 main components, Dam and Chelev. And the Dam came before the Neres and Keteris, while the Evarim, the Chelev, came afterwards. The explanation, Chelev corresponds to Tainug, the light. You see that someone who has much pleasure usually has thick fat. Kol Chelev LaHashem, it means all pleasure must be for Hashem alone. V'yishanagal Hashem, rejoicing in Hashem with joy and gladness from all one has, with zero other pleasure outside of Elikos. And through this, These words that I command you, meaning Anochi mamish mitzavacha, the essence of Anochi is commanding you. Through this, Torah becomes sweet and pleasurable. Now we can come to explain the concept of Chanukah and why we make the blessing, L'hadlik ner Chanukah, and what is the meaning of Chanukah Mizbeach, the dedication of the altar and the dedication of the house. It is written, Chanech lanar al pi darki, educate the youth according to his way, meaning when you want to teach someone and he is far from the matter, you must train him, be mechanech, by giving him many gifts and incentives. But it is also written, not a youth, I was a youth, and the sages explain that the life force that spreads through all the world to each one according to its measure, the fum shor delay, is called nar, youth, as it says, v'hu nar es b'nei bilha. And Bilha refers to Rachel, the small one, symbolizing the Hey Hachrena of the divine name Havaya, the level of Malchus, for his kingship rules over all. This is the level that brings beings into existence, yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing, and this is called small because it is defined and limited with boundaries. And relative to the Ein Sof, the infinite one, blessed be he who has no end, all of that life force is considered katnos, smallness, for there is no comparison whatsoever between finite and infinite. And so it says, Miyakom Yaakov ke katnu, who will Yaakov stand, for he is small. Because Yaakov stretches from one end to the other, from highest to lowest, and anything with ends has definition, and is therefore small relative to the Ein Sof. And in order to draw the Ein Sof itself into the offerings, the blood of the Talmud, the lamps, the keteris, and the limbs, the Mizbeach was too small to contain such divine revelation. Therefore, the Nesim, the princes, volunteered for the dedication of the altar with abundant gifts, far more than the single lamb offered on it each day on behalf of the community. Because the princes were on a higher level than the rest of Israel, they gave a large gift, silver bowls, oxen, rams, goats, in order that the communal offerings of every day should have the power to draw down that divine light day by day. And similarly, this is the concept of the Chanukah lights in the time of the Chashmonaim. The Greeks did not seek to kill them, only to make them forget your Torah and violate your statutes. As the Medrash says, in Bereshit Saba, they said, write for yourselves on the horn of an ox. And the explanation is, all idol-worshipping nations receive their vitality from the level of ox, pnei shar, but only from the waste and refuse of that level, the horns and hooves, which represents the sediment and the leftovers that do not ascend into the holiness of the pnei shar that carries the divine chariot. For the power to ascend and be included in holiness comes only from the nefesh elokis, the divine soul, which corresponds to the level of Adam upon the chariot, the inner face, but the animal soul comes from the Adam of the animal faces of the chariot, and in those faces too there is an Adam-like aspect, for the verse says, and likeness of their faces was the face of a man. Therefore, it is the Jewish soul that is the power to draw the light of Ein Sof itself. And the Greeks were jealous of Israel, and they wanted the Jews also to receive only from the horns and hooves, meaning from the refuse, the husk, so that they should not be included in the holiness of Adam Ha'elyon. And this is what they meant by, you have no share. They were trying to sever the connection to holiness. And the Jews were weak and few in those days, yet they nevertheless gave their lives for the sanctification of the divine name. And through that mysterious nefesh, they had the power to draw a new light of Torah, a fresh illumination. And this drawing down of a new light is the concept of Chanukah, a great gift, a generous influx, the level of Kayva Yeshua, the helmet of salvation, becoming a teres teferes seva, the crown of glory. And this is the meaning of hala vahidah, for hala means praise, and also has the connotation of behiloi nere, which when his light shines. Praise brings forth the qualities of the praised one, from hiddenness into revelation. When you praise a person for the virtues he has, the praise itself awakens those virtues to shine and express themselves. And so too, hallelujah, it means that the name Yud-K comes out from concealment into revelation, becoming the level of Yud Chachma and Hey Bina, shining. This is the drawing of the level of Adam that sits upon the throne, but the inner root of that Adam is higher than the level of Adam itself. It is the light of Ein Sof. And through that, the level of the name of Yud-K becomes today day and delay, the two companions that never part. And then praise the halakha, meaning the drawing of Chachma into the midas, so that the emotional attributes become batal as well. As it says, L'cha Hashem Hagdula. But all of this, the praising and the halal, the drawing from hiddenness to revelation, comes specifically through Avdei Hashem, the servants of Hashem, who accept upon themselves the yoke of heaven, as the verse states. Same Tassim Allah HaMelech, and as explained elsewhere, this level of halal and this drawing down of the idea of the 100 blessings that a person must make each day, each blessing being a drawing from hiddenness into revelation. This is the meaning of Yehi Shem Hashem Avedach Mi'atev Adelim. May the name of Hashem be blessed from now until forever. From now, meaning from the beginning of time, the level of Malchus, when the concept of time begins, Melech, he reigns, etc., and until forever, meaning that this revelation should extend all the way down through all levels to the very lowest dimension until there is a full revelation of divine light. All of this is halal, drawing the light outward. But Hidah, thanksgiving, is the level of Shuv, return. For there must be both ratzei and shuv. And above this is called mati v'loy mati, touching and not touching, or reaching and not reaching. Because in truth, the Ein Sof is not revealed in full in this present era. The full revelation will be only in the future, when Nigla K'vay Davaya, the glory of Hashem will be revealed, and all flesh will see. Together we'll see. But now the revelation is only like Kol Dedi Defik, the voice of my beloved knocking, an indirect hint. And since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy One has in his world only the Dal Ramas of Allah, the 4 cubits of Allah. Therefore, what remains for us now is Haidah, the deep inner surrender to the divine light that is drawn into one's Torah and Avodah, as it says, and my words that I placed in your mouth, and I placed my words in your mouth, and I am the Mishnah that speaks in your mouth, meaning that the divine speaks through the person. Thus says Hashem, Master of Legions, if you will walk in my ways, and I will grant you movers among these standards. To understand what it means to be movers among the standards, we start with this. The Malachim are called standards. As it says, Seraphim were standing. Neshamas too, before they come down into this world, are called standards. As Eliyahu and Avi says, as Hashem lives, before whom I have stood. But after the neshama descends into this world, enclothed in a physical body and an animal soul, then she is called a walker, a mover. Why are Mahalchim and pre-birth neshamas called standards? Because their very source of creation is from the level of letters. Malachim come from letters of Hashem's speech, as it says, and by the breath of his mouth all their hosts were made. Yidden, by contrast, arose in his thought, letters of thought. Letters, both in thought and speech, are like the level of daimim, stillness, because letters are merely vessels that receive whatever the seichel pours into them. They have no independent movement, therefore they are standards like daimim, without motion. Now, you might ask, don't we find movement by the malachim? With 2 wings they flew? Yes. But the movement comes only through an awakening from below, and it's Jerusalem de Lasata. When Yidden down here say Kedusha, then the malachim above also cry Kaddish. And then it says, with 2 wings they flew, and one called to the other. To understand how an awakening from below brings an awakening from above, we must recall that there are 2 kinds of divine energy, Mamale Kalamim and Seva Kalamim. Mamale is the divinity that fills each world according to its nature and structure, descending step by step, enlivening every being according to its specific form and measure. This vitality comes from Malchus. As we say, your kingship is the life of all worlds. All the unimaginable multitudes of Malachim, thousands times thousands serve him, and myriad times myriads. All their praise is only towards the king, the source of this Mamali light. And it is towards this level they say Kaddish, 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 drawing holiness from the infinite above into Hashem Tzavos, the Lord of hosts, down into the fullness of the earth is his glory. And his glory covered is his enclothing within the world. Covered, Gematria 32, refers to the 32 Lamed Beis and Sibas Chachma. Because the way the Infinite One enclothes himself in the world is through Chachma, as it says, this is the union of Kuchabrichu Ushchinte. Now, the entire purpose for which a soul descends into this world is not for his own perfection. The soul needs no repair for itself. It descends solely to refine the animal soul through Iskafia and Ishapcha, until the animal soul is only one desire, its Father in heaven. As David HaMelech says, who do I have in heaven? And with you I desire nothing on earth. This is achieved through godly soul, as it understands and contemplates that Hashem Echad of Shema Yisrael. Shema, meaning to understand that Hashem is one in heaven and earth, and the Ches and Dal of the 7 heavens and the earth, and the 4 directions are completely nullified to the Aleph, his absolute unity. He is exactly the same before creation and after creation. As he says, I Hashem have not changed. All existence comes into being only through Baruch She'amar V'haya Eilam, through a single utterance. And saying Baruch Shem Kaved Mechusa, recognizing his kingship, is what makes all worlds appear in the eyes of flesh as something. It is his kingship that forms the somethingness. From this comes the ability to fulfill V'ahavta with all your heart, both inclinations. But before Shema, Chazal established 2 blessings, beginning with describing the Malachim, how they crown and sanctify Hashem, and how the Afanim roar with a tremendous thunder. Why? Because to fulfill with both inclinations and to conquer the Yetzer Hara, to bring it to Iskafia and Ishapcha requires a fierce battle. As Rivka was told, one nation will overpower the other. And as it says about Yaakov wrestling with the Sar of Esav until the break of dawn, meaning until the dawn of the Geula, the entire time of exile is in battle. And Rav Yavad, sir, the older will serve the younger, refers to the great spiritual root of the animal soul before the king reigned. Its fall into clippers only for the sake of being raised higher later through the Jewish soul. Therefore, the only way for the animal soul to be subdued is by drawing from its own supernal root the holy chayas, the lion, the ox, the eagle of the Merkava. This is why we speak of the malachim before Shema. Then in Shema itself, we draw the animal soul into complete bittul to Hashem Echad, to the point of Mesiras Nefesh, leaving its natural enclosure. This is like what the Torah says, horse and rider he threw into the sea. The horse by itself has no greatness. Only when the rider mounts him does his power become apparent. He can then go places the rider cannot go on his own legs. So too with the animal soul. By itself it is tied downward, but when the godly soul rides upon it, it becomes lifted higher than the godly soul alone could reach, because its root is higher. Rav Yavitzar. And therefore, during Shemoneh Esrei, the animal soul itself, now elevated, draws down the infinite light into the malachim, so they say Kaddish when we say Kaddish. This is the true meaning of Isra bringing Isra, that from below upward through our bittul to the infinite, the highest revelations are drawn down. Now we can understand the matter of drawing down the infinite one, blessed be he, from above to below. This is accomplished through Yidden engaging in Torah, which is his wisdom and his will, through the 630 mitzvahs that Isa and the 7 mitzvahs that Rabbanan. Together they make 620, the gematria of Keser, the supernal crown. That means they draw from the level of Keser, the encompassing light that stands far above the entire chain of spiritual worlds. And this is why after we say V'yahavta, the upward movement, the yearning of the soul from below to above, we continue immediately with the meaning after the rising up, we draw down the things, the words from the very level of Anochi, the essence itself, from above to below, that nothing should block it, nothing should conceal it. And the malachim, the angels, they receive from this the drawing down of Torah that comes from Yidden. Like Chazal say about Kanadan, that the souls sit, hayeshev beganim, and the angels listen from them. And even here in this physical world, when a Jew is learning Torah, Chazal tell us that sometimes malachim gather around like a chuppah, drawing to the light of Torah that a Yid reveals. So it turns out that the angels receive from Yidden in both directions, from above to below, the elevation we cause, and from above to below, the revelation we draw. And this is the meaning of Mahalchim bein hayim to Meila. I will give you movement among those who stand. 2 types of movement, upward and downward. Among the standers, the angels, meaning that the inner vitality of the angels comes from the movement that Yidden create both ways. But all of this is if you walk in my ways. What does that mean? The power of Yidden, for Yidden to accomplish such an unbelievable thing, to elevate the angels and also draw down to them, comes because we are children of Yaakov, the Bria Chatichin, the middle bolt that runs from one end to the other, connecting the highest to the lowest, and through Torah and mitzvahs, which are 620 pillars of light, the pillars that connect ceiling and floor, above and below. That is the ways, the paths. A derech connects one city to another. So to the Torah and mitzvahs, they're the pathways through which all this spiritual flow travels. And like the drop that travels through every limb of the body, so to the shefa, the divine flow, goes through all the mitzvahs. And this is what it means, Kol Erches Hashem Chesed V'Emes. All the pathways of Hashem are kindness and truth. The flow only moves through Chesed and through Emes. But it's impossible to have the drawing down from above to below unless first there is the rising from below to above. As Chazal say, whoever says, I have only Torah, doesn't even have Torah. And there's more. The Gamata Todnes Basi, and you will judge my house, meaning the judgment over the animal soul, because with words alone you can't fix the animal soul. It doesn't listen to sweet explanations. It needs strict discipline. This is the meaning of the sweat of the chayes in the celestial world. Just like a person, when he trembles from fear, the fire within him pushes the water outward and he sweats. So too the chayes, the supernal beings, tremble before the divine throne, and from their awe comes a kind of spiritual sweat, a flow of water, a holy influence taken from the awe itself. This becomes the Nahar Dinur, the river of fire that is poured onto the heads of the wicked, cooling and extinguishing their ego, pushing out their selfish fire. This is the judgment. This judgment is what refines the animal soul, because my house refers to the godly soul. Heichal Hashem Hema. They are the chamber of Hashem. They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within them, within each Jew, not just within the building. And after all this, I will give you movement, meaning both types of movement. But this ultimately is speaking about the time to come. Because today our divine service is called Vishev, running upward and returning downward. The running is from below to above. The return is from above to below. But in the time to come, when the level of Seviv Kalaman, the encompassing light, will be fully revealed, where darkness will shine like light, there will be no concealments at all, then both directions will be pure movement. Even the return will be like running. No up and down, only forward. But before that can be, first there must be Tadn, the judgment, the refinement, the breaking of the ego, as explained. And this is the whole story of the miracle of Hanukkah and similarly Purim. First the war, the struggle, the battle of holiness against darkness, and only afterwards the miracle of the light, the revelation, the day of rest.